everybody, I'm going to talk a little bit about percents, decimals, and fractions today. And this is off of some information or informational sheet that I call my survival guide. It's got a lot of good stuff pertaining to percents, and decimals, and fractions, a lot of examples. So it's set up very nicely. I'm going to share this with you with some of these different strategies today. So the first one, to change a percent to a decimal, we're going to move the decimal point 2 places to the left and then remove the percent sign. So look at some of these examples that we have for you here. Now, anytime you see a percent, so for example, this is 15%. Anytime you see a percent, if you don't see a decimal in it, like for example, this one, we see the decimal already here between the 1 and the 7. But here we don't see a decimal in the percent, so notice it's always in the back end. It's always behind that last number if you don't see it originally in the percent. So here, since I'm going 2 places to the left, you grab the decimal, go 1, 2, come over here, put your decimal in, put your 15 down, remove the percent sign. So 15% is the same thing as 1500. Same thing over here for 4%. You don't see the decimals, you know it's located at the back. So go over 1, 2. There's a little, I call these little waves down here, a little empty wave down here. So anytime you see an empty wave, you'll put a little 0 in that empty wave. So here you see a decimal 0 4, which is read as 400. There's a couple more examples over here. Here you see the decimal between the 1 and the 7, so I go over 2 spaces and you see you get 17 thousandths. And down here, the 6.5%, I actually will go ahead and write that as 6.5%. And rather than putting this as my answer, I'd probably go with this one as my answer down here. So you still grab your decimal, go 2 spaces on over to the left, and you see the decimal 0.65, which is 65 thousandths. So that was going percent to decimal. This time it's decimal to percent. So very similar, except instead of going to the left, we're going to the right. So move the decimal point 2 places to the right and add the percent sign. So from here, if you have 12 hundredths, you're going to grab the decimal, go 2 spaces to the right, 1, 2. You don't need that 0 in the front. So over here, you got 12, put the percent sign in, and you're good to go. Down here, grab the decimal, 2 spaces to the right, 1, 2. Empty wave, so pop in a 0, and you see you get 80%. Same thing for these couple other examples over here. So I'll give you time if you want to pause it and look over those. But still just grabbing the decimal, going 2 spaces to the right, and make sure you put the percent sign in. Alright, moving along. So this time, we're looking at changing a fraction to a percent. So if the fraction has a 100 for a denominator, write the numerator with the percent sign. So these are the easy ones here. So if you already have your fraction set up so you have a denominator of 100, just take your numerator, put it down, put a percent sign with it, boom, done. So over here, 5 hundredths becomes 5%. So like I said, if the 100's on the bottom, grab that numerator, put it down, put a percent sign. 81 hundredths, just take the 81, right down here, put a percent sign, 81%. And then 2 5 tenths or 2.5, just take it down and put your percent sign next to that as well. That's the easy way. Now, if it doesn't have 100 already for the denominator, what you need to do is divide the denominator into the numerator and then move the decimal point 2 places to the right and add a percent sign. So basically, you're turning this fraction into a decimal, and then once you get your decimal, you're doing the same thing that we did when we had up here. Move it down just a little bit. So we had up here, we had these decimals, move the decimal 2 spaces to the right, turn to a percent. So, for example, you got 1/8. You put the 1 inside the house and 8 on the outside. So the numerator goes in as the dividend, denominator out here as your divisor. And then once you figure out your long division piece, you have a decimal 125, in other words 125 thousandths. And then like we talked about up here, where you just move the decimal 2 spaces and put a percent sign in. Do the same thing here. 1, 2. So it goes between the 2 and the 5, you get 12.5% or 12 5/10%. For 1/4, same thing. 1 goes in the house, 4 is on the outside. Once you do your long division, you see you get 0.25. And then grab the decimal, go 2 spaces to the right, and you get 25%. So that's one way you can do it. Now another way you can do it is you can come back over here and see you've got a couple denominators that you can get to 100. So for example, over here, if you have 4/5, well actually, let me come to this one first, because look, we just did this one a minute ago. So here was 1/4, and we used the long division way to get 0.25, and then move the decimal over and got 25%. Rather than doing the long division, you can come down here and do this shortcut for 1/4. You can say, how do I get from 4 to 100? Basically setting up a proportion. And you can say, get 4 from 100, I do times 25. So I did it for my denominator, do it for my numerator. So do times 25. And you'd have 25 over 100, which would kind of come back into what we did right here. Anytime you get something over 100, you just take that number, put it down, put a percent sign over it. So if you have 25 over 100, it becomes 25%. Same thing for these two examples here. So this one's 4/5, so you can multiply 5 times 20 to get to 100. So do times 20 on top, you'd have 80 over 100, which is just 80%. And then also over here, you could do 10 times 10 to get to 100, so do 7 times 10 on top to get 70%. Copy or cut that off, that's 70%. So, that's how to get from a fraction to percent. Now let's go the other way to get to a percent, start at a percent and get to a fraction. So that's what this is right here. So if you start with a percent and go to a fraction, remove the percent sign and place the number over 100 and then reduce if possible. So here, you got 5%, put the 5 over 100 and just come back in and reduce. We can reduce by dividing by 5 on top and bottom to get down to 120. Same thing for 18%, put the 18 over 100. We can reduce by dividing by 2 on top and bottom to get down to 9/50. Now sometimes you can't reduce. You see over here, for example, we got 3%, put 3 over 100. Nothing goes into 3 and 100 other than 1, so its greatest common factor is 1, so you just leave it as 300. And these other couple examples over here, you see you just put the number on top of 100 and reduce down. Now, for this here, these last two pieces don't deal with percents. It's stuff that you've already done before, turning decimals to fractions and fractions to decimals. But just as a review, if you turn a decimal to a fraction, remember that the words for a decimal are also the words for a fraction. And remember to reduce it to simplest form. So use decimal place value here. So if you see 0.1, that 1's in the tenths place. So you read that as 1/10, and you write that like a fraction as 1 over 10. That cannot be reduced, you leave it as it is. Here, you have 0.2, so that 2 is in the tenths place, so that's 2/10. So you write that down as 2/10 and divide by 2 on top and bottom to get 1/5. So reduce down if you can. A couple of examples down here, 1500s and 125 thousandths, and once you write them as fractions, reduce down. Now, if you're changing a fraction to a decimal, we actually looked at this on the other side. Flip over again real quick. We looked at that right down here. So when you have the fractions to decimals, you see you put the number that's on top, known as your numerator, inside the house. Number on bottom or your denominator outside the house. Same thing over here for the 1/4. That 1/4 actually pops back up over here. So the same strategy we have on the other side. Numerator goes in the house, denominator on the outside of the house, and then just go back in and turn them into decimals through your long division. I'm going to slip this up just a little bit, because down here, the last little part of this survival guide dealt with some need to know fractions, percents, and decimals. So this is just kind of a little handy tool right here that anytime you see a particular fraction, or percent, or a decimal, it gives you its equivalent measures for the other ones. For example, if they give you a fraction, it tells you what it is as a percent and a decimal. Maybe they give you the decimal, it tells you what it is as a percent and a fraction. Or if they give you the percent, it tells you what it would be as a fraction and a decimal. So I think this is some good information down here as well. So this is something that I definitely use throughout the year when I teach 7th grade. As I mentioned to you, I kind of call it my survival guide because it has so much good information on there. But that's just kind of a review for fractions, decimals, and percents. So hopefully this will be beneficial for you as well. I appreciate y'all's time. See you.